tremendous concerns about the economy. And based on everything that we've been able to come up with, we're going to be out of money. We are going to be out of money, unable to really do anything. And this is the improper way of saying it, but unable to print more. I would say probably by the third week of October, okay? And that puts us right around that serious pre-election time stuff, that time period, pre-election time period. So now I've got to tell you that, if that's if in fact, if folks can, Joe, are you there? Okay.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can indeed.
I'm using a cell phone. I do not have, something's wrong. I hear you. I can hear you over on Skype. It says I'm connected to your call. I got things plugged in right. I don't know what the problem is, but I still have it connected. It's still on.
All right.
And
well, that's good.
If I can get that going, we'll use it.
Well, look, we don't want to sound like a bunch of amateurs here because we are, but
no.
but look, yeah, technical things do happen, and they happen at the most inopportune times. We had a system crash right before the show, and one of our computers was taken out. Joe, it sounds like you're almost.
I'm going to cut off Skype. I think that's what it is.
Yeah, there's an issue there where there's a lot of background noise. All right, but as I was telling everyone that we were working on some news headlines. I think I think the biggest headline right now, and I think the biggest point of interest people ought to be looking at, is the economy. There's a lot of economic news. More so than anything else, the economy is going to be reaching, in our opinion, my opinion, based on information, a critical mass probably the last week, if not about the last week of October, maybe this middle of October. And if that happens, folks, look, we've been talking with respect to the election. Wouldn't that be a trigger event to perhaps keep a reason to suspend the elections? As really wacky as that sounds, but we all know that Obama does not want to give up power. We all know that Mitt Romney is not necessarily the answer, or not the answer to our problems. We all know that the country is ill. At least the politics, the politicians of this country are not acting in our best interest. Our sovereignty is at stake. The entire future of our country is at stake, and of all the elections, don't you agree, Joe? Of all the elections in your lifetime, and that includes all.
I've seen 2 Clintons, 3 Bushes, and Obama. Really, as I remember,
look, there's just something not right, and look, when you can have John Corzine type people get rewarded, not see the inside of a jail cell, when you can have those people walking around, not only walking around, but working with the president on behalf of the president, and there's absolutely no justice for the people that are causing the massive amounts of grief, of financial loss to people. We know there's something really wrong, and of course we've known that for a long time. But I really want to caution everyone. I think that the big news right now is the financial aspect of things.
Oh and that being covered up, by the media, by the government. We have I saw an article today. There's a correspondence and collusion between New York Times and the CIA. And they talk about the CIA and how journalists, they together, I guess maybe the CIA decides what to post, maybe writes a story for somebody to post, as an opinion piece. I haven't got into this article. I just saw this headline, and I just pulled it up right now. I didn't read it, but they're talking about, that the Obama administration is using different media outlets being funded by Media Matters. And we saw that the other day. Funding against Fox News, $100 grand. They used to fund anti-Fox News media.
Well, it's just kind of a dog and pony show between the media outlets. I got to tell you, look, there's really no difference anymore. You've got just like the banks, you've got really six major banks. You've got probably six major news corporations that control the news. You know, the banks, the six major banks, the too big to fails, the too big to jails, I guess would be an appropriate word. Now we're right now we're talking about this QE3. Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke may not satisfy the inflation trade onlookers at the close of his Jackson Hole speech, which is scheduled for this Friday, folks. They're talking about this QE3, but look, again, the printing of more money, the whether it's digital zeros or actual dollars flooding into the market is not going to help us. And
no. The Federal Reserve, their 99-year charter, I guess, is up at the end of this year. If not
right.
Next year, it's probably this year. There's no talk of what's going to happen, which makes me believe that there will be the replacement by a North American Union type currency or a more consolidated one world currency, as the Council on Foreign Relations, their publications continue to talk of the strengthening yang or yuan, the China currency, and the crash of the euro and the demise of the dollar at the same time. We're seeing that, just like Kissinger said, and we've been talking about, the rise of China, the fall of America and world geopolitical powers, and the dollar is not going to be the world's reserve currency for much longer, by the way things look, and that would really turn us full blown into a third world country.
Well, exactly. And we've been hearing, and Joe and folks, I want to tell you something, listeners. We've been hearing from our listeners across the world. I'd like to read, and I'm not a fan of reading anything on the air, but I was quite moved when I got this email today. Folks, if you remember last Friday or a week ago Friday, I believe it was a week ago from tomorrow, which would have been last Friday. If you remember, we had a caller from Bordeaux, France. Now, I'm not going to give up any personal information or any other information that's just that I don't think is proper, but I just want to say that that caller, that woman who called on Friday from Bordeaux, France, said, I listened to the interview. Now, this is her email now. I listened to the interview you had with Mr. Steve Quayle, Mr. Greg Evenson, and I dare say that it moved me to tears. It has been years since I've been moved to prayer, as I have been in the last weeks. My husband was born and grew up in the People's Republic of China. He was born near Hagmann, which is south of Siberia. In the winter, temperatures were down negative 40 degrees Celsius. His childhood was filled with no heat in the winter, rationed food that was not enough to make a meal for a family, and hard labor. His own father, who was a doctor, was sent away to forced labor for 10 years for making a public complaint against the government. After 10 years, he returned home, a broken man, physically and mentally. And then she goes on to talk about some personal things, and then I'm going to stop right there. I think that one paragraph says it all. They know communism. They know communism up close and personal. And if you recall, folks, if you recall what she said on our show, Obama is a communist.
Yes,
right?
he is. But I think more so a Satanist and a globalist but using communist tactics to carry out the agenda of destruction of the United States economy, the United States Constitution, and everything else that entails.
Yes. Now, I have another...
With that,
go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, before we bring in our guest, I wanted to give people an update on what I've seen on the Hurricane Isaac, now Tropical Storm Isaac, as it hits the Gulf Coast. There's flooding, 25 inches of rain in parts of Louisiana, the Arkansas River. They're talking about that being flooding. The storm system is slowing down over the land, so the more that happens, the more rain is going to fall in those areas. So we got to keep an eye on those people, pray for those people, and
pray.
hopefully,
Indeed.
I saw a story about a dam possibly breaking in Louisiana. There's over 50,000 people that were forced to mandatory evacuations today. So
here we go again. And I'm a big believer as well, folks, in God. Look, and you don't have to agree with me, okay? But to me, I'm a very spiritual person. I look at this and I think, well, 7 years. Isn't that interesting? That 7-year time period between Katrina and Isaac, and think about the biblical implications of the hurricane. Name Isaac, and think about what it's doing. And think about. I received an email today from someone in the military, and pointing out a particular news item. And this gentleman and I'm not going to disclose his name, but again, we're talking about somebody in the military saying that, this is very foretelling to the future of our country in the coming months, in his opinion, if this story is true. All the pieces are now set and every nation will be against Israel, including the United States. We go against Israel, our country will fall immediately and will be no more. And of course, that's a reference to Genesis chapter 12, verses 2 and 3. Think about that. And folks, if you've got a Bible handy, if you don't know about Genesis chapter 12, verses 2 and 3, or if you're not familiar with that, go ahead and read them, because it's so important to me. I believe our support of Israel. Sure, we've been supporting them since their inception, but they're the only democratic ally that we've got in the Middle East. And they may be, okay, you might not agree because they're Jewish. You might not agree for whatever reason. You might not agree, but I think in the Bible, in the Old Testament, I think that there was a covenant made between God and the nation of Israel, the nation of Israel and the people, the Jews. And I think we have to look to the Bible for discernment and direction. You might not agree with the politics. I'm not talking politics, folks, so please do not send me any emails about that. I'm talking about God's covenant with the nation, and that's all I'm talking about. So I'm thinking now, because of the Middle East situation, and I'm sorry for dominating, Joe, but this has been on my mind today ever since I got this email from this individual in the military. I just want to say that I think if you are a Christian, a true Christian, and if you really think about what's going on in the world today, specifically in the Middle East, and what Obama has done with respect to Arab Spring, what Obama has done extra constitutionally, outside of the Constitution, outside of congressional approval, to places like Libya, and in particular to Egypt, and throughout the swath of the Middle East countries. Compare that to biblical prophecy, and don't forget, folks, 25% of the Bible is prophecy, is prophetic in nature. I think out of the 1,820-some verses, or 1,283 verses, I think I'm dyslexic now. But anyway, I think if you look at those verses and look at how many times Israel and Jerusalem is mentioned, and how many times the Word of God is in there talking about how to treat His people, it stands to reason. Excuse me. It stands to reason to me that we should listen to that and take heed to that. And I think that this is a harbinger of things to come. Now, you might think I'm totally whacked out, but that's your right.
We see this massive amount of crime, injustice, pestilence, war, famine, hunger, all the forms of unrighteousness one could imagine being promoted as normal and good on this earth, especially this country. We are the abortions. I mean, we could go on.
Oh yeah, 70 million abortions, and then we export that. That's right. And look, yeah, we are in trouble. This nation is really, I was going to say on the brink of, but at this point, under this regime in particular, we're morally and spiritually, for the most part, bankrupt, and we need prayer, we need intercession, as Steve says, to get us back on the right track, or at least the people who are receptive to that. We need that. And look, I'm not a minister, pastor. I'm not someone who knows the Bible as well as Steve, Greg, and everyone. But I do know, as an investigator, I know facts, and I also know that there's an element of faith built in here. And there's, but most importantly, I just, how can one deny the connection right now between what's taking place and the behavior of our country, the behavior of people in our country? That just disturbs me. And Joe, before we bring on our guest, and folks, this is a real treat for me. I mean, this gentleman, to me, this is a real treat. You're gonna enjoy the program. I want you to, if you're in a car, buckle your seatbelts, and if you're not, buckle them anyway, because it's going to be a tremendous program. But before we bring on our guest, I thought of him when I got this email from a listener. And Marianne, I want to thank you for sending this in. I don't want to embarrass you, Marianne, but I want to thank you for sending this interview, or this email to me. I'm not going to read the entire email. I'm just going to read this one paragraph. And again, it made me think of our guest. She writes this, and again, I'm taking this out of this email. My friend's husband suffered severe physical and emotional abuse from his parents. Well, I'm sorry. Let me back up here. She says, and again, this is from Marianne. Thank you, Marianne. I listened to your August 28th interview with Steve Quayle and Greg Evanson. I was touched by what Greg said about peace officers, and I've got a nice story to tell about one that I thought you would enjoy. My friend's husband suffered severe physical and emotional abuse from his parents. In addition, when he was a boy, his mother only gave him lard sandwiches when he went to school. A peace officer somehow found out about that, and every day when the boy was on his way to school, that officer would just happen to come by. And he would talk to the boy, and he would say, hey, you know what? I love your mother's lard sandwiches. Do you think you'd mind trading with me your sandwich? Would you mind trading your sandwich for mine? I really like your mother's lard sandwiches. And every day, he would give the boy a good, healthy, nourishing, enjoyable sandwich in exchange for the lard sandwich. Now think about that. A peace officer. Now, whether or not that story is urban legend, myth, or whatever, or you might find it on the internet in some other incarnation, it doesn't matter. Just want you to think about the spirit of that email. And with that, the gentleman we're going to bring on, his name is Keith Hansen from the Keith Hansen Show. And folks, I really want you to go to KeithHansenOnTheAir.com. That's www.KeithOnTheAir. I'm sorry, not Keith Hansen. It's KeithOnTheAir.com. That's KeithOnTheAir.com. Visit his page. Go to his page. But more importantly, do me a favor. Do Joe and I a favor. Do this show a favor. Mr. Hansen is really at heart a peace officer. He's a pro-constitution. I mean, this guy, he's very constitutionally minded. He cares about this country. He cares about the direction of this country. He cares about the things we care about. We need to stick together. You know, we're all on the same team. And I'll tell you, Keith doesn't need my endorsement. But, you know, there are some people out there who are on the same side, who are fighting the same fight we are every day, day in and day out. And Keith is one of those guys. There are people on the front, on the tip of the spear, trying to educate people. Keith has a show every Saturday out of Naples, Florida. And I would urge everyone to listen to his show. And again, his website is KeithOnTheAir.com. But more importantly, or equally important, when you go to the website, on the upper left-hand corner of KeithOnTheAir.com is a Facebook like. I want you to share, folks. Like his page and share his page with others on in your Facebook, in your social arena. Because I'm going to tell you something. There's not one thing that Keith has posted, or that Keith stands for, that I disagree with, or that Joe disagrees with, I think. Not to speak for him, but I think that's true. This man is a dynamic speaker. He's a business owner. He's got his profession is tactical weapons training. Now he'll explain more about that during the program. But he's a great speaker, a very desired public speaker, and he's here to tell us what we need to hear about the direction of this nation. So, Joe, just help me welcome Keith Hansen. Keith, are you there?
I am. Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
How are you?
Very, very well. And
I got to tell you, I'm blown away by that introduction. I'm not going to be able to fit through my doorway here. My God, thank you very much.
Well, you know, I have to tell the listeners. Keith and I were talking on we were testing out our Skype connection earlier today, and we started talking. And again, folks, it's like I've known this man for my entire life, or longer than I have, and I was blown away by the information, by the level of knowledge this man has, and by Keith, by you, the information you have, and by your story and everything. And you know, it's great to know that you're on our side, that you care about things, and it's great to know that you're out there educating people and getting people off their butts and telling them what they need to know. The same way.
Well, that's the challenge right there. But the first thing I got to tell you is, listen. I mean, you're building me up. Listen, I'm just an average guy like everybody else, and what motivated me to get involved, to get up off my couch and to become vocal, was watching what's happening to my beloved republic. This is not the country that I was born in. This is not the country that I was raised in. This is a foreign entity to me, and it's quite frankly it's saddening, and it's frightening to see what's happening.
Oh, well, you know, okay, I know your history a little bit, but if you want to share with our listening audience your history, you were a peace officer in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
The People's Republic of, yes, Romneyville. Romneyville. So I'm intimately familiar with MIT, and you know, this is a long story. You know, boy, I'll tell you, I'm really upset at the fact that I now have to make a decision and go into a voting booth and vote against my conscience and pull the lever for somebody that I don't believe in to prevent a person who I even more so don't believe in from having another 4 years in office.
Wow. Yeah. Well, yeah, you know, that's where we're at. But you know, and you said a lot of very dynamic things earlier today in the conversation. But how in the world, Keith, did we get to this point? Really, is this the best we can do? Replace one idiot with another idiot? I mean, really, or one? Well, you know.
I think the issue is complacency. You and I spoke earlier, and I said, you know, I think the vast majority of Americans are well-intentioned. I think the vast majority of Americans are good, and they're well-intentioned. But the problem is that they've become complacent. And I think part of the problem is that we've never really had domestic strife in our country. When's the last time we had foreign troops on our soil? When's the last time outside of the Great Depression did we really have a situation where people were truly desperate and destitute and really at risk? We haven't had that. So we go to bed at night thinking, you know what, this is America. It'll never happen. And unfortunately, because of that, we've experienced this change blindness. And that's really the only way to explain what's happening. It's a slow yet steady erosion of freedoms that has brought us to where we are today. And we've allowed it to happen because, well, it's just a checkpoint at the airport, or you know, well, it's just a tax here or just a tax there. But it's the slow, steady, incremental changes. It's the doctrine of the inevitability of gradualization is the actual term for it. And it's change blindness. So, you know, slowly but steadily, we start eroding freedoms.
Right.
And, you know, we, next thing you know, we wake up and we're in a different place.
Well, I mean, cannot an argument be made that we are already in that different place and people just have not recognized it yet? I mean, you know.
I mean, everything is upside down and inside out. as
well,
more so
it's
than
funny,
it's ever
Joe.
been.
It's funny, Joe, because I was telling Doug earlier that my definition, how I define liberalism, conservatives were excoriating the Democrats for voting this guy in without knowing anything about him. And here's where the hypocrisy plays in, because now who is he's not presumptive anymore. He is the nominee now. But who is now the nominee? So all of these, and I saw it happening in Florida. All of these well-intentioned conservatives who, again, 2 years ago or 3 years ago were excoriating liberals for voting for Obama, and now they're doing the exact same thing because they're voting for Mitt Romney because of his looks, because of his oratory prowess, because of his pedigree, without looking at what this man's background is. And this is the thing that I find absolutely amazing. Everybody was tuned into Sean Hannity's show on Fox News when Marco Rubio was on there. And, of course, don't get me started on Marco Rubio because he's a sellout. But everybody was waiting to hear Marco Rubio endorse Mitt Romney. So Sean Hannity comes on, and he says, it looks like Mitt Romney's going to be the presumptive nominee. And Rubio says, well, he is going to be the nominee, and that's why I'm endorsing him, because we need a candidate who can beat Obama on his record. And Mitt Romney is the only person who is capable of doing that. He's the only person, and of course, and I'm paraphrasing, but he is the only candidate or the best candidate to beat Obama on his record. And I mean, Doug, at that point, I literally threw a remote control at the television set. And I said, how the hell can you sit there and say that this guy is the best person to beat Obama when he is a mini Obama? Everything that Obama is doing, Romney has done on a state level in Massachusetts. Now, and this is the insidious thing behind Mitt Romney. He gets up and he says, well, I'm a true Federalist because all I'm doing is, recognizing state sovereignty under the 10th Amendment of the Constitution. BS. Okay? Because socialism is socialism, whether it's done on a macro level, the United States, or on a micro level, on a state level. Romney care is Obamacare. That's it. Okay? Romney tripled the price of a concealed weapons permit in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. He supported the Feinstein gun ban. He supported an outright ban on assault weapons in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And you want to talk about the abortion issue, on December 9th, 2005, signs a bill into law that mandates that all healthcare providers in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts provide abortion care or abortion services to their patients. And if you know anything about the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, there's a large number of Catholic hospitals in the Commonwealth. So, and did the Roman Catholic Church stand up and say anything? Of course not. Why? Because they're neutered too. Because they've been infested with communists and pedophiles and homosexuals.
That's sad.
It is sad.
That's sad. And look, both Obama and Romney, they supported TARP. They both, Romney supported Obama's economic package, stimulus package. Neither candidate that wants to balance the federal budget. There's so many similarities between the two. They're both on the record as saying that the president shouldn't question the independence of the Federal Reserve, when in fact, the Federal Reserve is really the bane of our economy. Both candidates, they're opposing an audit of the Federal Reserve. They're on record as just loving Timothy Geithner. He's one of the main people for are allowing the economic problems. I can go on and on.
You see the recent headlines of Romney is now, pro using gold to back the American currency, and he wants to audit the Federal Reserve, and he's going to go after the corruption of the banks. Have you seen those headlines lately? That is pure propaganda. That is
it's smoke and mirrors.
The Tea Party or the Libertarian or the real constitutionalist and freedom-loving Americans that is trying to gain, their trust by putting out those lines that they can, audit the Fed. They're going to be the ones to put the gold standard back, et cetera, et cetera. And you can guarantee Romney is definitely no different than Obama. I want to say this. There's, people endorsing Mitt Romney, and other people, some like the people, the truth movement, the people who call themselves awake, the 912ers, the Tea Parties. Some of these people are endorsing Mitt Romney who are, I wouldn't say famous, but well-known, and they're getting backlash from other people saying, well, how can you support this guy? But at the same time, you know, we hear you can't in good conscience vote for the lesser of two evils, but can you in good conscience vote for somebody who you know will do less damage, but or you think will do less damage to the country than the other?
Yeah, I mean, Keith,
I don't know.
What do we do here?
That's the question. I mean, you know, it's with Obama, you know, we're in a Maserati in fifth gear heading towards the cliff. With Romney, we downshift to second gear, but we're still heading towards the cliff. Listen, we got to get this budget balanced. We've got to get our spending down. We need to encourage growth in this country. And the only way that you're going to do it, first and foremost, is to get Obama out of there. That's the first thing. I think you're going to see an immediate, you know, if Romney winds up, and here's the big if, okay. What do I see happening in November? I don't think it's getting rid of Obama.
See, okay, now, ladies and gentlemen, go ahead.
I'm going to wind up. You know, I'm going to go off onto a tangent here, because I mean I can't get to where I'm at in this discussion and not go into this.
Well, but you've got our permission and, or in fact, our urging. So go ahead.
If you were to look at this election cycle, if you could create a transparency of this election cycle and the election cycle between Carter and Reagan, they are virtually identical, absolutely identical. Now, when we think back to the election cycle, and I'm 38 years old, so I was really young. I was born in '73, so I was, 7 years old at the time. So I don't remember much of it. I think really the first memories that I have was when Reagan got shot. But Duggan, you and I were talking about the gas lines back in the Carter administration.
Yes, yes. Something you read about in history books, and of course I lived through. So okay, go on.
So when we look back at that election cycle, okay, there was absolutely, according to the media, according to the mainstream media, there was absolutely no way that this actor-turned-governor from California was possibly going to unseat an incumbent Democratic president. Because, I mean, again, the mainstream media was absolutely enamored with Carter. He was wonderful. He was great. This guy could do no wrong. And even though he was nosediving the country, he could do no wrong. And so when you look at the polls, I mean, the polls were either neck and neck. Interestingly enough, when you look at the polls now, everything is neck and neck. And I want to say one thing to your listeners. Don't listen to the polls, because the polls exist for one reason. That's to convince you that the battle's already lost and to not even bother fighting the fight.
Right.
That's the reason for those polls. When I see these polls that come out that say, well, it's neck and neck, 44% say they're going to vote for Obama and 44%. Who the hell is going to vote for Obama? Seriously.
Well, I can tell you this, Keith.
Who are going to vote for this guy?
There are a lot of people on the federal dole that are going to vote for this guy.
Well, that's and
people died this year.
Yeah, well, Mickey Mouse, Popeye, olive oil. This is it. But the point is that if you look at that election cycle and you look at this election cycle, they're identical. Okay. Now the mainstream media would have you believe that getting up off your couch and actually going to vote for anybody other than Obama is just a waste of time because he's a shoo-in.
Right.
Okay. And I think he realizes that, and I think it's hysterical that Jimmy Carter is an advisor on Obama's re-election campaign. What the hell are you doing, Jimmy? Teaching Obama how to lose? Well, you got that down, Pat. Okay. So I think Obama's smart enough to realize that history repeats itself.
Correct.
Okay. So we look at this and we say there is absolutely not a shot in God's green earth that Obama's going to get reelected. He realizes it. Everybody else realizes it. That's why the significant likelihood of a false flag event or some type of, as Rahm Emanuel puts it, manufactured crisis, opportunistic occurrence to justify the implementation of martial law and suspend the elections is a very, very real possibility right now.
Now, you are a former peace officer from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and you're saying this. So this, to me, not that any of our other guests, including but not limited to, Mr. Greg Evenson, who I've got the utmost respect for, and Mr. Quayle and others, they said the same thing. But again, you've got the history as a peace officer from Massachusetts, and you're saying this. This is not fringe. This is someone. This is someone in the mainstream saying this. That, you know, in fact, we could have a manufactured crisis staged event or whatever.
Well, when you hear it coming from his former chief of staff,
yes.
Rahm Emanuel, when you hear Rahm Emanuel saying, never let a crisis go to waste. A crisis is an opportunity to do things you couldn't normally do. Okay? Well, there's a little bit of a glimpse into what these people are thinking. And listen, okay, these people take the writings of Saul Alinsky as a papal bull. This is Bible to these people. Rules for Radicals is a Bible to these people. Make no mistake about it. That's the first thing. So they will use anything that they can do to possibly manipulate. I mean, that's what these people do.
So
they utilize politically expedient occurrences to bring about a desired outcome.
Okay. Now, Keith, let me ask you this. I wrote an article here. I've got a source under that the law enforcement source that works under the umbrella of DHS, who is in a position to get some information about the very issue we're talking about here. Now, a lot of people are saying, you know, are poo-pooing that and saying, you know what, Hagmann's just a wingnut. Nothing's going to happen. You know, the elections are going to take place or whatever. In fact, they're saying not only won't it happen, but America will not let it happen. Americans won't let it happen. It's going to be transparent. They'll be able to see through it. Yeah, you know, I get emails. I've gotten, since that article was published, my latest article was published on, I don't know, Tuesday, I guess it was Monday, Tuesday. I've gotten over 500 emails that are roughly, you know, most of them calling me just a nutcase. See, the way, but my source is telling me, look, Obama has got no intent of leaving that office. Now,
no, I don't believe he does. There is nothing about that man's personality. His blatantly narcissistic, his DSM-4 diagnosable self-aggrandizing personality disorder suggests that he is going to peacefully hand over the keys to 1600.
Wow. Okay. Now, if that is the case, and I too believe that to be the case, and others who I respect believe that to be the case as well, what do you expect from the American people? What do you expect to see happen?
Well, you know, I'm in your chat room here too, and I'm reading a lot of what the comments are.
Actually, I'm not. So, okay.
And you know, there's a lot of people that are, you know, saying, yeah, the Americans will you know, never let it happen. Ha ha ha. You know, it's interesting. I started out with the organization Oath Keepers. I started out as the Southwest Florida Regional Director for Oath Keepers, was moved up to State Chapter Vice President, and then upon the resignation of the Florida State Chapter President, I became the acting Florida State Chapter President for Oath Keepers.
Okay.
One of the things that brought about the inception of the founding of Oath Keepers was the occurrences 7 years ago during Hurricane Katrina. During Hurricane Katrina, we saw an unconstitutional gun grab. I got to ask you this: who loves their guns more than Southerners? Now, of course, I'm a Yankee. I mean, I'm from I shouldn't say the word Yankee because I'm from Boston Red Sox territory. But you know, I mean, I'm from New England, so. You know, I look at this, and of course, you know, we always think of the Southerners as, you know, the good old boy redneck, you know, gun loving, you know, all that stuff. So, I mean, who loves their guns more than Southerners?
True.
I can't think of anybody. How many of those good old boys from Louisiana do you think said they can have my gun when they pry it from my cold dead hands? I'm fairly certain most of them did at some point. So, how many cold dead hands were the guns pried from when deputy sheriffs, when state troopers, when California highway patrol officers and contract private security went door to door, car to car, boat to boat to confiscate people's firearms? Not a single one. How many shots were fired in resistance at an unconstitutional gun grab by these people who said, you know what, I love my guns and you can have them when you pry them from my cold dead hands? Not a single one.
Wow.
So,
you're right. And they use the situation to justify it.
Well, wait.
And this is the issue with this, okay? Everybody talks a good game when they're not facing death, imprisonment, whatever the case may be.
Right.
Okay.
So what you're saying, what I'm hearing you say, Keith, is the fact that, we might have the gun owner. I mean, we might have 300 million gun owners, or however, whatever the number is, and we might be talking the bravado talk. But when we do come face to face, the majority of with whatever it is going to be, the majority of the people are going to say, "Here, take them, take my guns."
I think if it was a choice between, you either hand over your guns or your food supply is cut off. I don't want to sell my fellow Americans out, but I think a lot of them would opt for being kept and being secure as opposed to actually putting up that fight.
Wow.
And listen, I'm not, in no way, shape, or form am I advocating violence. I would never advocate violence. Violence is not the answer. Violence, in fact, is the worst possible solution because it disempowers the people who are utilizing violence. And I know that seems like an oxymoron, but it does. I mean, if you're resorting to violence, then you lose your credibility. So in no way, shape, or form am I advocating any form of violence or anything else like that. And I'm sure the Southern Poverty Law Center and Mark Potok and the rest of those bleeding heart liberals, Mark Potok, if you're listening, go plug in your Prius and come back. But somebody's going to say, this guy's advocating violence and militias and all that stuff. No, absolutely not. I'm not. I believe in the rule of law. I like America. I love America because of the rule of law that we have. And I love it when I argue with a liberal because the first thing I ask him is, what's our system of government? And 99.9% of the time they tell me, oh, we're a democracy. Well, guess what, Skippy? We're not a democracy. And at that point, if you answer that question, I'm not even going to bother debating you at that point because that's like trying to argue English with somebody who's illiterate. If you can't answer a basic first-grade civics class, a question that would be put in, put to a first-grade first-grade student in civics class, all right. I'm not going to sit here and have an intelligent discussion with you. I will educate you, but I'm not going to debate an issue with you on that. The reason we are a constitutional republic is because we have the rule of law. Democracy is mob rule. It's been said. Democracy is two wolves and a sheep trying to decide what to have for dinner, and a constitutional republic is two wolves and a well-armed sheep. It protects the citizen. It protects the individuals through the rule of law, and that's what makes this country great.
But Keith, when you're backed into a corner, though, and I don't advocate violence either because I do believe, and you're right, resorting to violence does diminish your credibility to the extent that when you've got still an option or options, violence should be your last. But when forced at some point, whether it be at the point of a gun or at or whatever, when you're backed into a corner, at some point you're going to have to make a decision, I believe. God help us when people, or God help us when the first person makes that decision, because I just have this sick feeling in my stomach that when there has to be a first person to fire that first shot. But when I think that first shot is fired, it's going to be not only heard around the world, but it's going to start just this firestorm. Happening in America here. That will be the end. I mean, to me, either it's going, and I mean, from a biblical point of view, I know how it ends, but from a realistic point of view here in America, God help us all when that happens, because I do believe blood will run thick and deep in the streets.
None of the outcomes are promising.
No, they're not. But Keith, I mean, if pushed into a corner, the last thing anyone wants to do. Well, look, from your experience as a peace officer and with your experience with the Oath Keepers, how many? What's the level of cooperation from from the police or from the sheriff's departments or from even the National Guard in stripping Americans away, their guns away from them. What do you? I mean, how many people are going to turn on their citizens? Do you think?
Well, that's the question. I mean, how many people understand? How many people really have taken a good hard look at the oath that they take? You know, there's an initiative within Oath Keepers to, and I have to say I am not an officer or an organizer or anything else with Oath Keepers anymore. I stepped away from the organization just for my own personal reasons. I still believe in what they're doing, but just in terms of organization, it was a decision that I had to make for my own personal reasons. I absolutely support the mission. And it's, people say, what is, and I'm sure most of your listeners know what Oath Keepers is about, but you know, my standard explanation is that, especially when I would do a public speaking engagement about Oath Keepers, I would start off by saying, you know, exactly what Mark Potok says. Let me tell you what they say about us. Okay, they say that we are the most dangerous right-wing extremist group in the history of right-wing extremist groups. That would usually get a standing ovation at that point. And I say, let me tell you what we're not. We are not a militia. We are not a PAC. Okay, we are an educational organization that seeks to reach, teach, and inspire currently serving and retired military and law enforcement about the oath that they took to the Constitution and their duty to uphold it. That's it. So when you look at people like Mark Potok from the Southern Poverty Law Center, not to single him out, but when you look at people like Mark Potok, only a communist, only a truly, at the very essence of their being, a truly satanic person would actually take issue with a military or military personnel or law enforcement officers actually being asked to uphold the oath that they took.
Mm. Well, excuse me, that's very true. I mean, satanic does describe it pretty well, and communist, obviously, as well. Yeah, look, I can't disagree with you on that, and thank you very much for letting us know what really what the true definition of Oath Keepers is. Keith, we're up against the top of the hour break. We'll hold that thought. We're going to be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. Today is a live broadcast. It is the 30th day of August 2012. I'm Doug Hagmann, and with me at times is Joe Hagmann, my co-host. I want to thank you very much for hanging with us. Our very special guest tonight is Keith Hansen. Folks, do me a favor during the break. Do me a favor, all of you, please. Go to keithontheair.com. That's keithontheair.com. Bookmark that site, and while you're there, click on the Facebook link. Like his Facebook, because that does a couple of things. That tells people really what side you're on. That brings, and of course that does help all of us out, because we need to stick together in these times. We really do. I got to tell you, man, these are some scary times, and we are in the midst of a fundamental change in this country. And if we don't get it right this time, we might not have a chance for the next time. Stay with us. We're going to be right back after these short messages. Hi folks, Doug Hagmann here. You might know me as the co-host from the Hagmann and Hagmann Report, or as a frequent guest on Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie. If you're like me, you're tired and confused over today's headlines. You just don't know where to turn for accurate, concise information about really what's going on, what's truly going on in today's society. If you don't know where to turn for accurate, well-researched, and properly vetted news, I've got a suggestion. In fact, it's a requirement. Bookmark Canada Free Press. That's CanadaFreePress.com on the internet. It's just not for Canada. It's for news across the world. Judy McLeod, founding editor, has put together a vast array of talented writers like Kelly O'Connell, Daniel Greenfield, Dr. Eilita Johnson-Powell, a lot of guest columnists, very talented writers. Folks, that's Canada Free Press at CanadaFreePress.com. Now mobile friendly. Follow on Facebook, because without America, there is no free world.
Survival of the fittest. In any and all situations, survival is your #1 priority. That requires being tough and thinking smart. And the folks at Freeze Dry Guy are going to help you do just that. They have a long-range patrol ration entrees, what they call the Brick Pack. When you're in survival mode, it is absolutely the best item for your survival pack or bug-out bag. You can go farther, faster, and carry more food with the LRP cold weather ration entrees. Not only do these long-lasting, durable entrees help sustain you or your family through the harshest environment or situation, they are by far the most delicious of their kind. No contest. With a variety of tasty entrees, you can't beat the LRP Brick Packs. Let Freeze Dry Guy help you in your survival situations. Go to freezedryguy.com. That's freezedryguy.com or call 866-404-3663. That's 866-404-FOOD.
Sorry, folks, for that dead air. I just want to say something about Freeze Dry Guy. Folks, if you haven't done so already, go to Freeze Dry Guy. Go to HomelandSecurityUS.com, click on the banner on the right-hand side of the page, and visit the site of Freeze Dry Guy. Look at his August and now September. Can you believe it? September already? September specials. He's got quite an array of products on sale for September. It's my understanding that various products in the freeze-dried foods are low in inventory. So get your inventory now, get stocked up now, and tell them Doug and Joe sent you, because he'll treat you good. Well, he'll treat you good anyway, of course, but a very nice guy, and discuss your needs with him. Tell him exactly what you need or what your family size is, and of course he will hook you up with the products, the proper products, the amounts, and he'll make suggestions. And of course they've got other gear as well. Very practical, what they call survival gear, what I call necessary things to have in your array, your bug out bag, or whatever you want to call it. So again, HomelandSecurityUS.com, click on the right ad for Freeze Dry Guy, pay him a visit, tell him Doug and Joe sent you.
You better wake up fast and listen to this, America. The Obama campaign has launched attack squads disguised as truth teams dedicated to intimidating and silencing all political dissent carried over the internet that criticizes the Marxist Obama. Truth squads specifically focused on covering up Obama's endless trail of lies, corruption, and subversion, and using the Gestapo power of our own government to police and censor the internet and shut down websites that dare to carry the real truth about Obama's Marxist coup. Remember the names of these Gestapo-style agencies that work right there in your neighborhood: KeepingHisWord.com, KeepingGOPHonest.com, and AttackWatch.com. KGB, SS, and Gestapo-style police-state gangster organizations that work to silence the important voices of patriot dissent, some of which have already been shut down by Obama's orders. Adolf Hitler would have been proud. We're the 21st century Tea Party patriots.
Doug Hagmann, one guy that doesn't need a bullhorn to get your attention.
You want answers? I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to hour number 2 of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. That first hour flew by. I got to tell you, with our very special guest, Mr. Keith Hansen of the Keith Hansen Show. And folks, you can tune into his program. It's every Saturday for an hour. And I'll tell you what an hour. He utilizes every minute of that hour. And it was such a great pleasure to be a guest on his show. Talk about a knowledgeable individual and a true patriot. That's the Keith Hansen Show. But visit his website, Keith on the Air. That's KeithOnTheAir.com. And again, folks, please do me this favor. Bring him into your circle of virtual friends on the internet. Like his Facebook page, because we need to get the word out. All of us need to stick together. Talk show hosts need to put their egos at the door, check their egos at the door. There's no room for egos anymore. We're in really a dramatically terrible emergency phase in this country, and we need to, all of us, we need to work together to get the word out, to spread the word about what's taking place, educate other people, help them along, be their friends, and save our country. That's my. I'm pleading with you to do that. And in order to do that, of course, we can use the social networking. Let's use it. Let's use it the best way we know how, and that's by befriending people like Keith Hansen. Of course, our network as well, HomelandSecurityUS.com. Everybody, and let's get together. Let's stay together. And let's be a formidable force against the satanic forces that we're facing. With that, I want to welcome Keith back. Keith, are you with us?
I am, yes. Thank you.
Okay, good. Joe, are you there? Or are you still under the pillow?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
No, I am here. I just want to let you know I'm outside. I'm using my cell phone, and I'm keeping it muted when I'm not talking. So I will be commenting here and there, but I got to kind of hang back because of these audio problems, which will be just for today. And I apologize to everybody, and I thank you, Keith, and all the listeners for having patience. I really appreciate it.
Well, I'll tell you what. Thank you, Joe, for that. Keith, I'm going to open the phone lines. Can we take a couple of phone calls?
Yeah, absolutely, please.
All right. Let me grab my the switchboard here. I just wrote a note to Keith. I said, we have all this equipment, and doggone if I know how to use it, or at least use it well.
I'm trying to figure out how to read your notes when this Skype interface here, because I just have a big screen. So.
All right. Well, yeah, and I don't usually do that, but sorry about that. Anyway, call from the 347 area code. You're on with Doug, Joe, Hagmann, and, of course, our special guest, Keith Hansen.
Oh, good evening.
Good evening. What's on your mind?
Well, how you doing, gentlemen? My name is James from New York. I spoke to you about a week ago.
Yes, sir. paramilitarization of the police department. What do you make of that?
You know, that's a really interesting question, and that was one of the big issues. I don't want to say issues, but one of the big discussions within the executive structure of the Oath Keepers was whether or not that was something that was either appropriate or something that should be frowned upon. You know, listen, I mean, as a law enforcement firearms instructor, I'm teaching law enforcement officers, I'm teaching security officers, contract security officers, to be able to combat threats and to win, to survive those encounters. And on one hand, I can look at it and say it's necessary, because, you know, the criminals today are becoming far more sophisticated. They're losing their respect for law enforcement, so they're not afraid to you know, to shoot at police, to kill police officers, or to kill any other type of law enforcement. Do I think you need to have you know, a 6 or 8 member special response team kicking the door in of a house to serve a warrant? Well, not necessarily. I think there's other ways to do that. There is a term within law enforcement called situational dominance, where you overwhelm a suspect with such force or with an awesome show of force that you basically just catch them by surprise and they lose their will to fight. Oh my God, look at what I'm facing! All these people dressed in black with, you know, with submachine guns. I'm not going to put up a fight. So by going into a situation with an overwhelming show of force and establishing situational dominance, you head off a lot of potential problems early on. I can understand the concept behind that, but I don't know. I mean, that's a conversation that, I mean, you could do a 2-hour show on just by itself, because there's a lot of pros and there's a lot of cons. You know, I think a lot of times civilians, you know, and this is where, you know, again, some of your listeners may disagree with me on this, but a lot of times civilians are looking at the job of law enforcement and saying, well, you know, maybe that's not right, or maybe this isn't right, or maybe they should do it a different way. And the bottom line is, unless you've had the opportunity to walk in the shoes of a police officer or of a sheriff's deputy or of a state trooper or of any other role in law enforcement, you really don't have a true understanding or respect for the dangers that these guys face every single day. And I think we have to give them the benefit of the doubt. I mean, these people are, you know, they're out there, they're trying to make a difference. Is this all of them? Of course not. Are there bad cops? Of course. Are there corrupt cops? Of course. Are there law enforcement officers and, you know, CLEOs, chief law enforcement officers, that abuse their power? Absolutely. I mean, nothing is perfect. But I think as a whole, you know, I think a lot of the law enforcement officers are, and a lot of the law enforcement agencies are trying to equip themselves with not only the tools but also the tactics necessary to protect their officers.
Well, and I think though, Keith, you can understand there's a fear there by the average, by the people that are paying attention, that we could have a situation where they will turn that, and we see, of course, look, we see the MIAC report, we see all these reports about turning patriots into terrorists by definition, and we're afraid. I mean, I'm afraid because of my position on certain things and speaking out, that you know, one day that I'm going to be subjected to a SWAT team coming into my home for just speaking my mind. And so, I mean, I think you can see where we're coming from too, right? I mean,
oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. You know, but then again, I mean, that's where the job of an organization like Oath Keepers comes in. And you know, it shouldn't be Oath Keepers' job. I mean, it should be the job of every freedom-loving American to hold their departments, to hold their officers accountable.
But do they?
Well, I don't think they do, because okay. I think a lot of people lack the foundational knowledge to be able to build an argument, and then lack the desire to actually become confrontational. And I'm not saying to become confrontational to law enforcement by any means, but this is what I'm thinking. You know, and I noticed there's a huge difference between where I used to live in New England, between the sheriff's departments up there and the sheriff's departments down in Florida. The sheriff's departments down in Florida and down in the South, they tend to be, the chief law enforcement agencies for the counties down here. Whereas up in New England, and that isn't true necessarily in all New England states, but in Massachusetts, the sheriff's department's responsibility is the care, custody, and control of and transport of inmates and service of civil matters.
Right.
The sheriff, the constitutional role of the sheriff is something that I think a lot of people don't understand. But the sheriff is truly the chief law, it's the highest law enforcement officer in the land that is truly by, of, and for the people.
That's right.
And the role of the sheriff is to be able to safeguard the rights of his or her constituents, his or her residents, from tyranny. Because the sheriff has the ability to say to a federal agency like the ATF, or like the DEA, or like the Environmental Protection Agency, or the Food and Drug Administration, get the hell out of my county. And if you violate my county lines, I'm going to arrest you. And that's exactly what happened in, I think it was Jefferson Parish, after Hurricane Katrina. FEMA went in and actually cut the communication lines. They went in and chainsawed the communication lines because news outlets like Fox were broadcasting, the images of what was going on. So I believe it was the sheriff of, I think it was Jefferson Parish, who actually put his SWAT team, once they reestablished the communications hub, they put their SWAT team, their special response team, around the communications hub with orders to shoot to kill anybody who violated that perimeter.
Now,
and the sheriff has the ability to do that, and the sheriff absolutely should. In fact, I know a lot of the deputies down here in
Martin Luther King and not the prophet Amos chapter 5 verse 24.
Okay, Amos 5:24. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to have to.
Well, definitely, I want to check that out. So thank you.
All right. Well, Dr. Chappie, it's a pleasure to talk with you. I see you all the time, but I've never talked with you. But it's great to talk with you. Thanks for your question. Thanks for your call, my friend.
Thank you.
Well, it's my first time to call in. Hopefully not my last. Lord bless. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
God bless you. Thank you.
Yeah, you know, we've got a very eclectic mix in our audience. I got to tell you, I love our audience. They're great people, Keith. Extremely. I mean, they really are. They're on top of things a lot more than the average audience. I have a question by email, and this comes from TJ. I'll just refer to him as TJ. It says here, if you read this before the interview with Keith is over, I've got a question I'd really like to ask him. Keith. Okay, this is to you. Keith, in light of all the cases of blatant police brutality being documented, what would you advise everyday citizens to do when coming across a situation like this where police are completely abusing their authority and possibly endangering the life of an individual? And Keith, you've seen probably the YouTube videos, right? I mean, you've got some rogue. I mean, and he goes on, it seems like many officers know they can get away with it because they're captain and the courts will lean in their favor. And of course, this is from Travis or TJ. So, what do you recommend?
If you have the ability to document it.
Okay. Well,
I mean, you know, somebody had asked me once, you know, well, do we get involved? You know, well, the courts have upheld that there is no right to resist even an unlawful arrest. So, you know, in that sense, geez, you know, you're kind of damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. At that point, I mean, if you can document it, document it. You know, the courts have also ruled that the police do not have an expectation of privacy when they're in public doing their job. So there's definitely a level of intimidation when it comes to the videotaping. But, you know, videotape, they have videotapes. They have the dashboard cams, and there's actually new technology now that actually attaches right to the shirt, so it gives a perspective from or gives the officer's perspective. Which again, I mean, videotape is fantastic in court because you can't argue what the camera sees. It's not open to interpretation. It's in black and white. So document it if you see something. I wouldn't get involved because then, you know, you're likely to pick up criminal charges yourself. But document it.
Well, you know, we've as investigators we have dash cams. I've got in our one vehicle we've got a dash cam, and certainly it's running. You know, especially if we have an encounter with whoever, including a police officer. But we're looked on because we're investigators a little bit differently, I think, mentally, you know, because we have the, of course, identification we show to the police officer right away. So there's kind of not really a not really a camaraderie or brotherhood, but there's an understanding anyway that, you know, we're not out casing the neighborhood, or we're not out to, you know, doing something nefarious. But that said, the average person, I don't know if I would want, if I didn't have identification with me as an investigator, and I whipped out, or I had running a video camera in my car, being stopped by a police officer, we'll say, or in a situation, I'm not sure I would feel comfortable with that. But I mean, wouldn't most police look at that as antagonistic? You know.
Yeah. I mean, well, it would be. You know, it's a tough thing to. There are some states that are upholding that there is, you know, that there is no right to videotape. You know, the problem with this is it's a dynamic topic because this is new technology. So there's a lot of confusion as to what you can do and what you can't do, and then it's ultimately somebody has to become a test case. Somebody has to become that legal guinea pig, and then it gets kicked up the chain, and then it goes through the appellate system, and then eventually it'll wind up in the Supreme Court, and then, you know, SCOTUS will make a decision on it. And of course, you know, we know about SCOTUS now with activist judges, so
right.
You know, how much stock you can put in that.
I'm sorry, Keith. We've seen those test cases turn out good for people who are videotaping police. All of them have been thrown out, to my knowledge, especially the ones in Illinois where they were really pursuing that.
Meaning what, Joe? Because I'm not sure.
There was a guy who was facing 75 years in jail for videotaping police. There's another guy facing life, and those cases are thrown out of court.
Yeah. I mean, there are some extreme examples, Keith. I'm sure you're aware that one in Chicago. It's just, I mean, that was just so bizarre. I don't even. I'm not even sure how far.
Well, you know, Chicago is Chicago's one for the books. Let me tell you, Chicago certainly has its share of problems.
Well, I'll tell you what, Keith. Hang on a second. We're going to take one more call, and then I want to ask you. Earlier in the day, we were talking, of course, and I think I might have touched a hot button or two of yours, but I want to get your take on a couple of things before the end of the show. So we're going to take one more call on the hold here. And then we're going to come back to that. But caller 731 area code. You're on with Doug, Joe, and Keith Hansen.
Doug, Joe, and Keith. Hey, this is Lucy from Tennessee. I'm loving the program tonight. I've got we here in Tennessee sent Sheriff Mack's book to all the sheriffs in our state. Of course, the one in my county was not receptive to it at all. But I have a question. I'm here with let's just say the policemen come and say, turn over, if you have any guns or whatever, turn them over. Okay, what do I do as an individual in a house with dogs and a lot of grandchildren? What am I going to do?
Well, I mean, first of all, why are they at your door to take your guns? Do they know?
Well, I don't know.
What guns you have? Do they know what guns you have? If somebody came to my house and handed over your guns,
I'm not saying that I have a gun. I'm just saying, if they come, do I not answer the door? Do I not? I mean, if they call down martial law and go to strip everybody anything that might be considered a weapon, what do we do?
Well, the first thing that I would do is, and I'll tell you, there's I'm very active in the South Florida with the emergency preparedness groups down here. One of the first things that I would do is I would make sure that I have a group of like-minded people that in the event that something like that were to happen, I can be with. Because if martial law were declared, the last thing that I want to do is be home alone by myself. I want to be around a group of like-minded people because there's power in numbers.
Wow. Yeah.
And that's such simple but good advice.
And I'll tell you exactly what we've done is we have a series of triggers that if these things happen, we meet at a predetermined location with our bug-out bags, with our food, with our medical supplies, with our firearms, with our ammunition, and we go into a holding pattern. Because the last thing that I want to do when they come door to door is to be at my house by myself.
Now, Keith, how did you develop that? Okay, you're talking about a group of like-minded people. And you don't have to give any particulars about the size of the group or whatever. But how did you develop that? Because I think it's so important that we have a game plan here. We talk about the problems. We talk all day long about the problems, but no one really talks about.
We've got to have game plans to put in action so that we'll be prepared for whatever.
Right, and Keith just laid that out. How did you what did you do? Pick up the phone one day and say, "Hey, okay, let's organize this group, and in case it hits a fan, here's what we're going to do." I mean, how did you do this? How did you start?
Well, the first thing I want to do is I want to address Dr. Chappie because he's in the chat room and he says, Keith, do you expect martial law to be declared sometime this year as so many others do? I think it's a very distinct possibility that it would happen. I do think that there is a significant likelihood that it would happen in an attempt to suspend the elections and to, for all intents and purposes, declare an imperial presidency or to put Obama into an imperial presidency. And remember, that's what happened with Castro. There were supposed to be elections, and the elections never happened, and that's why Cuba's been stuck with Castro as long as they have. So I think it's a definite possibility. I think it's probably more than a possibility. We were talking earlier, and Lucy, I'm not getting off track here. I'm going to answer your question, but we were talking earlier, about the likelihood that Obama's going to wind up in there for another 4 years or potentially longer. I don't think there's any way on God's green earth that anybody could expect this man to be legitimately reelected. It's going to happen in one of two ways. Either he's going to steal the election And of course, the ballot machines and the ballot counting devices are manufactured by a company in Spain that just happens to have George Soros, one of the largest investors. Am I still there?
Yeah, yeah. Lucy, are you all right?
That was me, but he is under George Soros' dominion,
right.
The man in Spain.
Correct.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And George Soros is one of the largest financial contributors or financial shareholders of that company. So, I mean, listen, there's absolutely nothing that would give any reasonably intelligent and prudent person any type of confidence in an election cycle. We saw the games that were being played by Acorn during the 2008 elections, and I mean, Acorn is still out there. They've just been rebranded so many times that they're not known as Acorn anymore. Okay,
they've
so
changed their name.
I think it's absolutely possible that could happen. And I think because of that, I think a lot of us, in the course of just in having conversations, at Tea Party rallies or at 912 groups, people are saying, hey, what do you think's possible? Well, I think this is possible. Really, me too. Well, what would you do in this situation? Well, what would you do in that situation? Well, I'd want to have a group of people that we could, well, why don't we form this group? So the particular group that we have, everybody has a special skill that they can offer to the group. We have a couple of doctors who are obviously there because of medical expertise. We have people who are there because of defensive knowledge, defensive skills, firearm skills. We have other people who, know how to build water desalinators. We have other people who are really good with gardening. So, it becomes a little miniature community of people who are like-minded and who say, hey, listen, at the very least, if something were to happen. Now, again, for us, we're in South Florida, so we're in a very hurricane-prone area. So it doesn't have to necessarily be, an economic crisis or a political crisis. It could be we get nailed by a Category 5 and we're off the grid for a month. So we need to make sure that we're taken care of. So the genesis of our forming a group like that doesn't necessarily have a sinister origin. It's out of an approach or a viewpoint that's more pragmatic, because it could happen here. But again, it's finding people who are like-minded and just saying, listen, I would like to be able to just have a group of people that can come together in the event something happens, just until we can make sense of it.
It's that easy. And that's all we have to do. I mean, I guess we have I have a tendency to make things harder than what they really have to be. But I think you're right. I think if we just talk to people, make some phone calls, get on the same page, and be prepared. We can be prepared that way. And pretty soon, you've got one neighbor talking to another, and all of a sudden you've got a group of people, and there you go. I mean, it sounds to me like that's kind of how it evolved, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there you go. Lucy, Lucy.
I wanted to address one more thing to Lucy. First of all, if somebody comes knocking on your door, if they don't have a warrant, tell them to take a walk. That's the first thing, because nobody has the right to come inside your house and conduct a search or a seizure without a warrant. So if they don't have a warrant, tell them to get off your property. It's that simple. If they have a warrant, they'll let it be known. Now, if it's a situation of martial law, again, I wouldn't want to be in my house by myself. I'd want to be around a group of people that that I know are like-minded and that we can be looking out for each other.
Well, that's good advice. Is there anything else, Lucy, that you want to ask Keith?
I'm praying for y'all for wisdom and discernment and for protection.
Oh, we're praying.
Got to know that.
We're praying for you too, and we're praying for everyone as well for the same. And thank you very much for your call. God bless you, Lucy.
Thank you, Lucy.
Keith, we were talking earlier off air. What's your hot button? I mean, what's on your radar right now? You've got a show from 12 to 1 every Saturday, and folks, like I said, I really would like you to, as for this show and for the spirit of things, to visit KeithOnTheAir.com. Upper left-hand corner, there's a Facebook link. Click on that to go to Keith's show. But every Saturday from 12 to 1, I would urge everyone, 98.9 FM in Naples. Folks, if you're listening to this in the Naples, greater Naples area, you can hear them on 98.9 FM, WGUF, Saturday 12 noon to 1 o'clock. What a great show. And hopefully, I'll tell you what, Keith, again, you're to me, one of the few a very important talk show host who knows what's going on, and you've got a lot of great answers, a lot of great information, and you're really I just have a lot of admiration for you. But and that's why I'm so thankful to have you on our program tonight.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And again, I got to say, I'm just an average guy, who I have no background in radio. I have no background in broadcasting. I'm just an average guy who got sick and tired of throwing remotes at the television set, and I wanted to be able to. I wanted to become involved with this. I couldn't stand idly by. And that's one of the things. When I became a police officer, it wasn't necessarily a uniform that I put on. It was more of a recognition of what my personality was to begin with. I was always the kind of person that went in and took charge. When other people were running away, I was running in saying, how can I fix this? How can I put this back together? So it just felt natural for me to step into a role where I could try to make sense of something and to try to help other people to make sense of it. When I started my show out, that's what I opened up with. The reason that I'm doing my show is because I'm an average guy just like you who is, and I'll be honest, I'm not afraid to say it. I'm frightened. I am confused. I feel like I've been cheated. I feel like I've been lied to. I feel like I've been used. I feel like I've been manipulated. And I'm trying to make sense of everything that I'm seeing every single day. And what I try to do with my listeners each week is to try to dissect those topics and try to make sense of them. If we can wrap our heads around it and we can look at something and we can understand, or we can look at it with a with an understanding of the context with which to make sense of it, it makes it a little bit easier. And that's the point. You asked me what my hot button topic is. I'll tell you, one of the biggest things that I have an issue with are people that think that they know their rights. When I was a cop, I used to hear people say this. I know my rights. I know my rights. And it's my right to do this, or it's a free country. It's my right to do that. And one of the questions that I would always ask somebody, and it was just amazing to watch the heads explode. Okay, let's say that is your right. And I'm not going to tell you what my next question was, because I want to ask you a question. What's the difference between freedom and liberty?
Wow.
I don't know if you've ever been asked that question before, but what is the difference between freedom and liberty? When we say the Pledge of Allegiance, we do not say with freedom and justice for all. We say liberty and justice for all. What's the difference between freedom and liberty? Because that right there, the answer to that question is the explanation of why we're in the situation that we're in right now.
Well, I got to admit ignorance on this. Really, what is the difference between freedom and liberty?
Liberty.
Hey, I
is.
just came back on. I wanted to take a guess.
Okay, go ahead.
Up or nothing. I just want to guess, but I'm guessing that liberties are what are granted to us under the Constitution, under the law, and we have the freedom to carry those out. So. In order to have freedom, you need to be given liberties.
One correction on that. Okay, freedom or liberty was not granted to us by the Constitution. God gave us liberty. The Constitution recognizes the God-given rights and says government will not interfere with the rights that God has given you. That's the first thing. Government doesn't grant any rights, because rights that government grants, government can then take away. God gives us the rights. Government exists to safeguard those rights. Now, the difference between freedom and liberty is this. I'm sitting at my office right now, and I'm looking at a Glock 19. I am free right now. I have the freedom to pick this gun up and walk over to the window. I'm sitting in my office right now, so I can see cars in my parking lot. I'm free to take this gun and start shooting at the cars in the parking lot. Nothing is stopping me. Why don't I do that? I don't do that because I recognize that freedom comes with a responsibility, and that's the difference. Liberty is the responsible exercise of freedom.
Interesting. The responsible exercise.
The responsible exercise of freedom. So when somebody says to you, hey, that's my right, okay, let's presume that you're correct in your assumption that X is your right. what is the responsibility that goes along with that? And I swear to you, Doug, you'll watch their head explode.
Well, you had me twisting in the wind a little bit, but
you know?
Yeah, wow, very well said. But you know, a lot of times though, and I think this is where we're at, Keith. I think that the government has overstepped their authority so much. I mean, look at the TSA, for crying out loud. And we haven't talked about this before, but Keith, I got to ask you, what's your take on the TSA?
To be honest with you, I see the TSA becoming Obama's civilian police force. I see them deputizing TSA.
Okay, I do too. In fact, okay, yeah, I had some information earlier in the week where they were talking about federalizing.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine this motley crew of human flotsam and jetsam having the ability to, first of all, be armed, and second of all, have the ability to deprive you of your constitutional rights? These people can't even spell TSA, and you would even consider empowering these people? Oh my God! You know, that's it right there. You want to know what the trigger point would be? That would be it.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Yeah, you know, have you flown, by the way? Like, have you been subjected to any of the body searches or the nuke scans?
Yeah, I was just at the airport at 4:30 this morning, dropping somebody off. So and I watched them go through this we call them the microwave. So they went through the microwave oven. But yeah, absolutely. You know, but again, what's happened there? You know, it's easy for people to say, well, you know what, it's okay because we need to safeguard. How many terrorists has TSA stopped? How many terrorist activities has TSA? How many terrorists have TSA caught?
Zero. Zero.
They'll let people with burqas walk through, and I'll tell you something. You want to watch something? You want to see something disgusting? Go up to Boston. Go up to Logan Airport. This is where the 9/11 hijackers flew out of. Everybody running around in TSA. Actually, a lot of the restaurants, the Sbarros and the restaurants that are beyond the TSA checkpoints, they're all Muslims. They're all wearing burqas.
Wow.
If anybody flies up to Boston, pay particular attention to that, because you'll notice most of them are females. They're all wearing burqas.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
these people, no, we're not gonna check these people. We're gonna make sure that we sexually molest a 90-year-old woman in a wheelchair. We're going to make sure that we sexually molest a 6-year-old boy, because that could potentially be the terrorist. And you know, it's interesting, because the Israelis came over, and they said, listen, we can help you. I mean, is there any, look at Israel. Israel is a sheep amongst a pit of wolves. How many planes get blown up flying out of Israel? How many hijackings occur? You know why? Because Israel recognizes that there is an articulable threat, and they profile people. But profiling people, you might, especially in this country, oh my God, Doug, you might offend somebody's delicate sensitivities.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. And that's, you know, and that's one of the reasons that we're in the position that we're in today. We're in this position today because this damn concept of political correctness, I might offend somebody.
Right.
You know what? To be honest with you, if I offend you, there's probably a reason why I offend you. I made a commitment back in 2008 that I no longer would temper or tailor my speech to take somebody else's feelings into consideration. That doesn't mean that I'm, again, going to be irresponsible. I'm going to responsibly exercise my freedom of free speech. But I'm going to call it like I see it. And if it offends somebody, there's probably a reason why.
That's admirable.
But we can't go out and profile people because, oh my God, we might offend somebody. You know something? One of the things in law enforcement, and you know, most of the academies, profiling is a 40-hour class in the academy. If it looks like a duck and it sounds like a duck, it's probably a duck.
There you have it.
So it's that simple.
Yeah.
Now, the Israelis were willing to come over and say, listen, we can teach you how to profile people. We can teach you how to profile behaviors. We can teach you how to recognize people that are demonstrating threat displays, because we have this down to a science. And what did Logan Airport say? Oh, no, we can't do that. We can't do that.
So what did they end up with? They ended up with, well, the exact opposite of I mean, it's more than security theater.
It's the doctrine of the inevitability of gradualization, where slowly we get people accustomed to having their rights to be secure taken away from them.
Unbelievable.
And suddenly now it's okay, because you know what? Well, I'm just flying, so I don't mind going through this checkpoint. And then what's it going to be next time? Well, I'm just going over an interstate highway. So, now I'm going to, there are TSA checkpoints now that are showing up on highways across the country and at rest stops across the country.
That's right.
These bike units that are out there. So, and this isn't tinfoil helmet brigade, crazy right-wing conspiracy theory rhetoric. This is actually happening.
What do we do? What do we do, Keith? See, here's the thing, and I always say this. One person going through an airport who says, no, you're not going to grope me and I'm not going to get nuked. They get hassled and ultimately arrested or put in that glass box or whatever you want to call it. 2 or 3 do it. There's a fuss put up. Maybe the media shows up. But if everyone who went to that airport says, you know what, you're not going to nuke me, and you're not going to grope me, then what are they going to do? They're going to back down like they did during the Thanksgiving of 2010, I believe it was. I mean, shouldn't we, every one of us, quit making excuses and stand up for ourselves and for our rights?
Absolutely, but that would mean an inconvenience to you and what you have come to know as your standard of living. And most people don't want to do that. You know what? I'll sacrifice my dignity and my rights for the sake of security. And this is the thing, and this is one of the reasons why, again, we've gotten to the situation that we're in today. Because I don't care if I'm indebted to the government as long as I look good doing it, as long as I'm able to maintain my quality of life or my perceived quality of life.
Okay. Well, okay.
So, I don't know. I mean, somebody just asked in the chat room, what's the line in the sand?
I was going to ask you that. Yeah, I just saw it.
That's got to be something. I can't tell you what your line in the sand should be. That should be your own personal decision. But you have to have the conviction to say, if I meet this line, I'm not going to back down. And that's, again, I believe that what happened during Hurricane Katrina was a test. I think the government was watching. I don't necessarily think it was a government-sponsored test, but I think that they kind of sat back and stroked their chins and said, this is a very interesting case study on what happens under gun confiscation situations.
I agree with you. I mean, what better? I agree. I think that more than one government agency used what happened during Katrina to come to certain conclusions and to analyze the situation there. I agree with that. Keith, let me try to sneak in one more phone call. Can we do that?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Hold on just 1 second here. Caller from the 208 area code, 208 area code. You're on with Doug and Joe Hagmann and Keith Hansen.
Hi, thank you. My name is Sherilyn, and I have a comment or question regarding the TSA and the scanning there. Is that I understand that it's ridiculous as far as patting up old ladies and all this stuff. The whole thing is absolutely ridiculous. But it's kind of interesting how they're already doing that profiling with their watch list and their people, like I'm sure you guys are on it, I may be on it too, who knows, people that are speaking out and saying this is wrong or based off of what you're looking into, that they're already watching, profiling, and kicking some folks off of flights. They're not able to travel. So I guess if they want to just, I think they just want to make it hell for people, and it is our rights that are being violated, but that whole profiling thing is already happening.
Well, yeah. Now, what Keith, I don't want to put words in Keith's mouth, but what he's talking about is actual legitimate profiling versus profiling. I think you're alluding to, which is more of the negative profiling of people who object to the government principles. Now, I could be wrong, but is that what you're saying?
I would say that the no-fly list. There's certainly people on the no-fly list who belong on the no-fly list, of course, because of espousing certain beliefs that are dangerous. But it can become a tool of punishment, absolutely. I think if you actually took the Israeli approach to profiling and you recognize if you can sit down and you can have a 5-minute conversation with somebody, and if you know what to look for, if you understand the neurolinguistics and the neuromechanics of deception, you can tell when somebody's lying to you. And there's a term in law enforcement, it's just an acronym, JDLR, and it translates to just don't look right. When I teach defensive classes to civilians and also to law enforcement, one of the things that we're teaching is that the majority of people, when I talk to people who have become victims of crime, they'll say, I knew something wasn't right, but I couldn't tell what was wrong. If you can kind of understand that. There was something that was wrong, but I couldn't tell what wasn't right about the situation because you're lacking the context to understand those warning signs. But people behave according to scripts. People, when they're out and about in social activities or social events, anywhere where they're supposed to be, if somebody jumps out at you and you say, gee, there's something strange about that person, odds are it's because they're behaving outside of what a normal script should dictate they're doing. And when people are nervous because they're engaged in criminal activity or they're trying to hide something, they're going to display sometimes overt, sometimes covert neuro-linguistic, that means that the vocal patterns or ways of speaking or neuromechanics, they're going to move, they're going to behave a certain way that to a trained eye, you're going to be able to recognize this and say, this person is behaving outside of the script of what is normal for this situation, and this person deserves, greater scrutiny. This doesn't mean that because I'm flying one way, because my grandfather died, so now I have to catch a flight within 12 hours of receiving notification, and so suddenly now because I'm flying within, I bought my ticket within 12 hours of my flight and I'm flying on a one-way flight because I don't know how long it's going to take me to arrange funeral arrangements and so on and so forth, that suddenly now, I've got to be a terrorist and, I have to be groped at a TSA lane. So, this is an issue. There's the right way to do it, and there's the wrong way to do it. But people just passively accept it. Oh, well, it's just a sign of the times. And it's this passive acceptance of the steady erosion of our rights as free people in this country. We're allowing this to happen.
Well,
absolutely.
It's clear that it's cleverly designed, when they stand there and they have gloves on their hands to look at your ID and you ask them why, and it's for your protection, it just doesn't make sense, all the different things that they're doing. It's not, I don't think it's designed for efficiency. It's designed for taking away our liberties and our freedom.
Yeah, conditioning, Keith, would you agree? We see them at the airports now, we're seeing them at the roadsides. Pretty soon we're going to be seeing them at malls, stadiums, and so on. This process of conditioning.
Absolutely.
And I saw
when
driving downtown too.
I'm sorry?
Sorry, I said I saw, I live in the kind of in the Spokane area, and I'm just driving down the street, Homeland Security. There they are. They're already on the street.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely conditioning. There's no question about it. Listen, it's the bottom line is, people you need, because I'm just looking at the clock, Doug.
Yeah.
I know you're coming up to the top of the hour here. Listen, the totality of the circumstances of everything that's going on is absolutely amazing. This administration under Obama, Janet Napolitano, we have a steady erosion of our rights. We are being divided. This administration, a house divided against itself cannot stand. We are being divided on every front. It shouldn't have to take 3,000 people dying in a terrorist activity for us to become Americans. The last time we were Americans was when a plane crashed into our building. We need to come together. It's no more gay, straight, black, white, Christian, Muslim. We need to be Americans. We need to focus on what's going on, and we need to be solidified. We need to be unified as Americans.
And we need to stand up to the tyranny too, to the erosion and encroachment on our rights. I mean, I really believe that. And you, sir, are at the tip of the spear in doing that. And we are at the top, or at the end of the show already. I can't believe 2 hours went by so quickly. Mr. Hanson, I want to thank you so much for being a part of our show tonight.
Thank you.
And hopefully you don't regret appearing on with us, but I got to tell you, you're a good friend, a good ally. And folks, I want to just urge everyone to go to Keith Hanson. That is KeithOnTheAir.com. As soon as the show's over, KeithOnTheAir.com. Click on the Facebook, like, and get them in your inner circle. God bless you. Good night, everyone. All right. Hang on one second.